Dragon Quest II, Luminaries of the Legendary Line, a sequel during the time of 8-bit games, a time when, almost always, these things get freaky. Final Fantasy II, Mario 2, Simon's Quest, other Mario 2, Zelda 2, Ys 3, which is basically the second one, but that's a whole nother story, Wonder Boy 2, Rainbow Islands Bubble Bobble Part 2, I mean, holy shit. Like one or not, if you ain't Mega Man 2, then your sequel probably did something fucking weird. Video games have always straddled the line of art versus toy, especially back then, so developers didn't know exactly how sequels should work yet. You didn't buy twos and ladders after enjoying the first one. For Dragon Quest II, I heard worrisome sentiments. In any Dragon Quest rankings, I'd often see Dragon Quest 1 or 2 as the bottom two in swapping orders, unless the writer gave them ye old for their time novelty points. Seeing Dragon Quest II down there piqued my curiosity before starting it, especially when Flaffy swore to me it's not that bad, with some serious pause in his voice. However, I wanted to immediately jump into DQ2 upon beating 1, and after my return to Simon's Quest last year, I grew to appreciate that game a lot more. Sure, I have no desire to play Simon's Quest ever again, probably because I played it like 6 times, lost the footage, and played it 6 more times, but you know, I didn't parrot other people's opinions much, or to my own gripes with it. So is Dragon Quest II another weird-ass NES sequel? Actually, no. It stuck out because between all those games I rapid-fired, it stuck the most to iterating on the prior installment. Now, could Dragon Quest II be the weakest of the first 5 DQs?
Could be.
However, that mainly stems from how much it tried to grow the series and how every RPG later iterated on the formula laid out here. First things first, contrary to Western belief, DQ1 did not take off overnight in Japan. Pretty quick, but not a release day explosion. It needed good word of mouth. Partially with ads and articles in Shonen Jump written by freelance writer Yuji Horii. Keep in mind, not every kid knew that magazines for video games existed, but every young boy in Japan knew about Shonen Jump by the mid-80s. They had to find out about Dragon Quest at some point in the schoolyard. Putting ads in the same magazine as Dragon Ball drew kids' attention. Eventually, word spread enough about a game with art by Akira Toriyama and music by Koichi Sugiyama, which thought of this when responding to a comment. Think of that like if an American game had art by Jim Lee and music by John Williams. It sold 1.5 million copies on Famicom. Kids bought the game, talked to each other about it, went to their friend's house to help. Dragon Quest turned into a social phenomenon. You can't help your friend play Mario or other action games beyond use this subweapon. They do it themselves or you do it for them. Dragon Quest and Zelda helped push single-player narrative games as journeys you can discuss with friends. I bet a good chunk of my viewers, similar to me, get on a Discord call with friends while playing a single-player game and just talk about it together. Players got hooked and shared the experience with each other, creating significantly more hype for Dragon Quest II. Simultaneously, this Shonen Jump collaboration led to a long-standing partnership with Jump. Not long after DQ1, Torishima became the main editor on the magazine V-Jump, which focused on video games and video game-based manga, including Dragon Quest. If you look through old V-Jump, it has a high rate of Toriyama-based work. Dragon Ball, Dragon Quest, a new Dr. Slup manga. Someone doing a quick glance might think they whipped Toriyama in a basement for 20 hours straight, but thankfully they avoided that scenario. By this point, lots of people studied Toriyama's art style extensively for anime adaptations and other Dragon Quest work, so many across Japan could imitate his style, or at least one era of his style. Toriyama had an anime going from 83 to 99, and anime has a shit ton of people working on it. In particular, Osamu Kaneko drew a lot of Dragon Quest art, such as these ones in DQ Kids. I quite like the way their art looks here, but I can't find much on this because when I look up DQ Kids, I get actual baby stuff Square Enix sells. Never underestimate the breadth of DQ merch. Also, Nakatsuru Katsuyoshi, a DBZ key animator and character designer on the Boo Saga in the anime, did a Dr. Slump revival in V-Jump, plus at least one poster for each of DQ 1 through 6 that I previously mistook for Toriyama art since it's that good. Though knowing a DBZ anime staff member drew it does explain why Dragon Lord looks like this. On the flip side, and no fucking wonder sales went down quickly, I can't find any ads for Dragon Warrior 2 in America during the time it released. Only some print ads of the game box, which, reflecting back, I think I've seen in old Marvel or DC comics before, and some half-assed Nintendo Power features. A 2-page spread when it came out in the September 1990 issue, and a slightly longer feature later as an opener to their Dragon Warrior 3 help guide. I can completely envision kids learning about DQ 2 and 3 at the same time, leading them to buy only one of them. Anyways, for Dragon Quest II itself, not much outside facts happened with the staff to my knowledge. Not because it went smoothly though. Koichi Nakamura, the director, made an oopsie. Once Dragon Quest sales picked up, Cheetah asked him when Dragon Quest II could head to print. Feeling confident after Game 1, he said, "Yeah, we can finish before the year ends." Dragon Quest I came out in May, shipped to Nintendo for print maybe around April, giving the team 7 months? Well, Yuji Horii said they basically finished it after 7 months, though a Google search shows that it actually had a 1-month delay to January 87, because during playtesting, the team found it kicked their fucking ass. Just an unfun amount of difficulty, forcing them to go back and rebalance the whole game, though infamously ran out of time for perfecting the ending. Because of that, the NES version has an absurdly busted finale. Everyone I've ever heard that played Dragon Quest II on NES said they needed to grind the fuck out near the end. A wild thing to hear when the later versions still required a lot of grinding at the end. Dragon Quest II's short development forced the team to work hard because they wanted to implement as many of the ideas they couldn't fit into Dragon Quest I inside of 2. Now that Japanese audiences grew accustomed to RPGs and they could make the game on 1 megabit cartridges double the size of DQ1, the team felt alright increasing the journey's complexity. We get multiple characters on our side and the enemy's side during combat, a script with extra complexity, a larger map, and so many more enemies, weapons, armor pieces, and items. Easily the biggest size jump of the games I have played, well, mainly because of how small 1 came out. Like, we're comparing a 1/4 sized game to a 3/4 sized game here. I don't think I stress this enough, you can beat any version besides the NES original of DQ1 in a comfy 7 hours. You don't have to commit to much in the Super Nintendo, Game Boy Color, or Switch versions if you're on the fence about playing it. While I have my gripes with DQ2, mainly when we get to the end, I cannot stress how well it came out when it had maximum 8 months of dev time. Again, we can start with the box. Both sides of it emphasize the party, with the mainest hero in the center, while the other two are right behind him with their weapons. Interestingly, close to the same size as Blue Boy on every promotional material. I think to indicate how, unlike most later RPGs with a clear protag, the trio are fairly equal narratively throughout a majority of the journey. Personally, I think I like the Game Boy Color box art the most. It has the silly charm we've grown to love of Dragon Quest, with the light-hearted camaraderie that these three share. Today, I do plan to only play the Game Boy Color version, though honestly, it's not because I consider it the best. I didn't really sit down and talk about this last time. Dragon Quest 1 and 2 essentially have 4 versions before the HD 2D ones. Their original NES games, their Japan-only Super Nintendo remake double packs that updated them, the Game Boy Color version that shrunk down their Super Nintendo ports, and a Japan-only flip phone version that downgraded the Super Nintendo version differently, which Square Enix later ported to modern smartphones, Switch, and PS4. Between each release, Dragon Quest I only really changed the graphics, translations for English, and the doubled experience and gold gained in fights on all but the NES original, while Dragon Quest II makes significantly larger adjustments to each version. And yeah, I played 2 releases last time, but now we're up to big boy games. I could play an 11-hour edition and a 6-hour edition of the same game for one first part of a retrospective. I don't want to do that for the 20+ hour games just so I can say what you guys can read on the wiki. I chose Game Boy Color to stay consistent with Dragon Quest I, as it has 8-bit graphics and the benefits introduced on Super Nintendo, but the screen crunch becomes a bigger problem than it ever did in 1. A few late dungeons take a little longer, and I found myself opening the map while sailing more than other games. Top that with a topic for later and the jankest translation that makes choices somewhere between original Americanization and literal Japanese translation to result in no truly perfect version of Dragon Quest II in English. When you pick a version of DQ2, you need to decide which issue you can handle the most. For this video, I should have played on Super Nintendo since the fan translation has about as many issues as the official Game Boy Color one, and I could have avoided very annoying screen crunch. Hell, you can make an argument for the Switch version despite the bad art, because it has a good translation and easier traversal. Anyways, enough of that, let's go to the content of the game itself. After the Dragon Lord's defeat, Roma DQ1 and Princess Gwaelin left to begin their own kingdoms, expanding a greater Alefgard to form the kingdoms of Connacht, Middenhall, and Moonbrook for their descendants, the descendants of Erdrick, to watch over. After a century of peace, Hargon, the big new evil cult leader of evil, sends his monster followers to attack Moonbrook Castle, killing the king, most of the guards, and placing a curse on the princess, making her hard to find. Only one guard escapes, crawling his way to the castle of Middenhall to warn the king of Hargon's danger. After awareing the king that Hargon plans to resurrect an even eviler evil, the guard passes away. Due to his old age, the king tasks his son, Prince Roma, with saving the world from Hargon. Erdrick's blood runs inside of him, as well as his cousins, the Princess of Moonbrook and the Prince of Connacht. Issuing our hero his first goal, recruit the other scions of Erdrick to form a party. Dragon Quest II starts stronger than 1. In both games, we only see one town truly affected by the villain's power, Damdara in DQ1, Moonbrook in DQ2. While we saw the outcome of Damdara, we didn't have a connection to it and the people in Dragon Quest I itself. For an 8-bit game just showing any town destroyed by the Dragon Lord, I gave it points, but it's a rough draft for what we get with Moonbrook. As the home to the princess, a descendant of Roma I and a known playable character from the cover, we immediately have a connection to her. She inherits player emotions from aspects before turning on the game. Seeing Moonbrook at the start then adds weight to the location when we return here later. Instead of guessing who died through NPC dialogue in a different town, we know what fell, making our quest start with more motivation and starting the theme scene more in Dragon Quest III through 5 of fighting for those that can't. Also, said scene did not exist in the original Famicom version. To my knowledge, this and the save system are the only additions to the Dragon Warrior 2 release in North America. Dragon Quest II keeps up the detective mystery aspect from 1. Converse with NPCs to get information that could relate to anything. However, with the increased scope, we learn a little less per town. Middenhall mainly teases us with what we can't do. We can't open these multicolored doors, we can't make use of this warp point because it leads nowhere, and we can't pound the prince's concubine because Enix wants to sell this to kids. Unlike DQ1 where you played as an unknown hero trying to prove his lineage with Erdrick, Roma 2 has grown up with everyone knowing him. Townsfolk talk to him with familiarity and respect as a prince, somewhat worried about his big quest outside of the castle. Once leaving, we first need to find the Prince of Connacht named... And no, we're not doing that one. Punching in a cheat code at the title screen to rename him after Flaffy, the friend who got me into the series, and the princess I changed to this jumbled 4-letter bunch of garbage that'll make more sense when we reach a female protag without a character limit, pronouncing it you win. Fluffy and Ewan have received multiple canon names, though most people just call them by their kingdom, so I want to roleplay with custom names. Anyways, remember last time when I said how I liked the lack of event flags in Dragon Quest I? Not the case with 2. It fucking starts with event flag hell. Our friends back home told us to find Flaffy at Connacht to the west, and tipped us off to how we could stop at another town, Leftwyn, if we needed a break on the way. Quite literally, a break town with nothing too conspicuous. Possibly a good area for your first grind. Reaching the castle, we learn from his dad, sister, and Canuck residents that Flaffy has a scatterbrain. He went off to start saving the world himself, prompting the king to request us to aid him, leading into a humorous search across the whole northern continent. We retrace his steps from a small campsite to a cavern where heroes receive blessings to meet an old man telling us he went to find us back in Middenhall, to Middenhall where dad tells us he went back to Canuck where they say he hasn't returned. So last option left, we find he took a fucking break and left win. It gets on your nerves a tad because of the forced circle you have to make. However, I think it sets up Flaffy perfectly. He's our funny guy. Strong and courageous, same as the rest who share Erdrick's blood, but needing of someone to keep him on track. While looking for him, you fight quite a few enemies, making it so once you recruit him, you should have enough gold to catch him up to Roma equipment-wise, letting us do one last bye to his dad and sister to head right for the cousin 2 hunt. Okay, a little bit of grinding first. Finding Princess Ewan follows the same formula as Flaffy. We trek towards Moonbrook to learn what happened to her, stop at a resting town, Munahan, and both have guards stopping us from progressing through these shrines to ensure a player doesn't pass without the necessary party members. Unlike the hunt for Flaffy where everyone told us exactly what to do, we need to fit some puzzle pieces together this time, including very subtle ones in Munahan.
What the dog doing?
In Moonbrook, we meet the ghosts of who once lived here, all of whom fear for the princess's safety. The king himself, unable to see or hear, awares the princess that she has suffered a curse changing her into a dog. On the side, another knight tells us about Lars Mirror, residing in a swamp to the east, and a still living knight. A third ghost tells us to use the Lars Mirror on the princess in a town not too far from here to save her. And here I fucked up. Like, not majorly, just wasted my fucking time. I walked over to the east to find this swamp, and I guess I forgot how it went when I played 2 years ago, because while the swamp sits right here, plain as day, impossible to miss, I didn't walk in to pick up the mirror immediately. Something in my brain said, oh, I probably need to find a swamp area, like one I can enter with a sprite on the map, and ignored this, so yeah, ran around fighting random encounters, accumulating experience for a while like a dumbass. You only need to step on 2 poison tiles. You don't take much damage. I had no reason to fear or not check this. With said mirror, we head back to Munahan to humanize our cousin, completing our party of 3. Yep, only 3 scions of Erdrick in this generation. These luminaries of the legendary line can continue going forth to defeat Hargon. Dragon Quest II's best addition to the series comes from the party system, a system the developers wanted in Dragon Quest I since Wizardry had one from the beginning, mainly backing out due to cartridge size. In battle, after you finish making a move with Character 1, Character 2, and then Character 3 makes a move. I don't need to go too in-depth on turn order because anyone this far has played other RPGs before. I made a statement as obvious as Chi-Chi is hot. Dragon Quest II didn't invent the party, but it did innovate with how it presents it. In every Wizardry, Ultima 3, even Final Fantasy I later on, you start the game by making your party that you should stick with if you want to avoid major handicaps. In Wizardry, the character creation takes a long time. In the Dragon Quest I video, you may have noticed I only showed 1 fight from Wizardry, a lack of footage resulting from me doing a test play where it took me a solid 10 minutes to build my party, got through 2 fights, then a few days later went back to actually record, made a new party because it didn't save right, taking 10 more minutes to do so, and party wiped on fight 1 because I made a shit party. It takes such a long time to even start playing Wizardry and punishes you for fucking up your party creation. In some instances, I can see players only realizing their party sucks after a few hours, at which point you need to commit if you don't want to grind up brand new guys. Not to to mention, it stays true to Dungeons & Dragons for party creation, with just a bunch of fucking text. No visuals without the manual that I assume I should have kept on hand. Dragon Quest II popularized the trend that nearly every JRPG followed, at least by the 16-bit era, where the narrative led you to your party members. It engages you during the start of your journey rather than giving you busy work. Dragon Quest I already simplified equipment management by making the weapon store completely unmissable and easy to read, while DQ2 prevents any excessive stimulation by letting you set up one party member, then upgrade one while setting up a second, upgrading two while setting up a third, and finally, pure upgrading all three from then on. It makes sure anyone can follow along as the story progresses, and as the genre grew more narrative-focused, other RPGs followed. No more reading 3 manuals to figure out the game. Plus, since you have 3 characters that fill specific archetypes, you don't run into the problem where your 10-minute bad decision at the start leads to a complete party wipe. At worst, you waste money on a lame equipment piece. Now, for our 3 characters, Dragon Quest II took a huge step by giving our other party members personality. Now, not a whole lot. After you recruit Flaffy and Yuen, they go nearly silent for the remainder of the game. However, both of their introductions do so much to cement them into your mind for the remainder of the journey. You see them as characters early on and can imagine how they might interact with each other. Fluffy tries hard despite his airheadedness causing him to fail. Yuen has to avenge her fallen kingdom and represent it with as much dignity as possible, and the Prince of Middenhall is still you. That goes for every main protagonist, though 2 does something none of the others do. After the cousins join together, it doesn't treat any as the de facto hero. Erdrick's blood runs in each, meaning they share the same expectations of their people. I especially need to give extra mention to the princess. Art and spin-off appearances for the princes reinforce what we already saw of them in-game. Best exemplified to me with Flaffy looking a little hesitant in nearly all of his original Famicom guidebook art, while Roma 2 seems pretty normal hero with a tad more of a mischievous side than Roma 1. Yuen gains the most from the artwork and spin. Okay, just Itadaki Street. She has a serious demeanor in some because she just lost her kingdom and has the most motivation to stop Hargon, while tons of it flips that. We see her enjoying new equipment and having fun with the spells she casts on enemies. Except here, Super Nintendo Princess, why are you looking so tough? She reminds me a lot of Aerith from FF7. Seems like the typical lady healer role who mothers the rest of the squad, but actually loves to joke and have fun. Makes her a very cute character, indicating that her life before that raid must have not solely consisted of prim, proper princess practices. Kinda wish she always had the dog ears from this Itadaki Street artwork. Each of their designs also indicate their role in combat. Artwork of Roma has him with a very heavy sword and shield with his head covered up by his hat, indicating how he has the highest HP, defense, raw attack, and equipment. Then Yuen has a flowing dress and a cap covering her head. Said cap resembles that of a Christian nun's headdress or a Muslim's hijab, provoking spiritual vibes to indicate her massive MP and superior spells to Flaffy. And Flaffy himself. Okay, so Toriyama needed to indicate 2 things. Roma and Yuen both min-max. Yuen should seldom press attack, and to my knowledge, Roma 2 is the only main hero in Dragon Quest that can't cast any spells. Flaffy does both worse than the other 2, so he needs a design somewhere between. Flowy cape instead of a dress, small sword and shield, half a helmet to let his goofy hair out, and in older versions, small black eyes Toriyama typically reserves for cute characters like Poir and Pisuke. It leans into the goofy side with a little heroism showing, which, as a goofy character, I like it. If he had time in the narrative dedicated to showing heroic aspects like comic relief characters and later RPGs often get to do, I think he could fight the punching bag status he receives in Dragon Quest II. Putting that aside, I really enjoy the trio as a set. They follow standard character archetypes which work well for a game that needs to tell a player about them for narrative and combat in a quick time frame. When paired with the artwork, it gives you the feeling that the 3, despite not knowing each other prior, accepted each other as family quickly. After all, blood is thicker than random bar recruitment. Now again, when we get to combat, Dragon Quest II has more of everything. More spells, more equipment variety, and so many more enemies. Starting there, Hori and Nakamura did not have Toriyama from day 1 with Dragon Quest I. Chunsoft needed to start conceptualizing and programming on vague placeholder ideas of monsters. Until Toriyama gave them his unique designs, they had no clue about the comedic twist he might give each monster, which could explain a few of the weaker designs like Lunatic and Droll Drone, who from here on only appear in games that need every monster ever, like the Dragon Quest Monsters series or the MMO Dragon Quest X. From looking at the few pre-Toriyama concepts available for 2, it seems like Yuji Horii had a better idea of designs he wanted to see in Toriyama's art style, resulting in close to 40 new monster designs if we exclude recolors. DQ1 had 38 with recolors and the boss. Reminder, this part must have finished by month 7, and Toriyama still had Dragon Ball every week. Many iconic mainstays made their debut in DQ2, such as the Walking Corpse, the Silly Gargoyles, Gigantus, the Wide-Chested Cyclops, and of course, the new slimes, Bubble and Heal Slime. The former teaching you about status ailments by poisoning you early in the journey, while the latter heals themselves or their party members. If only he was our party member. They've leaned all in on the wacky creative side of Dragon Quest for monsters, and once we reach 4, nail down nearly every enemy as distinctly Dragon Quest. It helps the series stand apart from later RPGs that might have surpassed DQ in other aspects. With the increase in designs, it becomes a little easier to figure out who might cast what. Like in DQ1, design-wise, the pink chimeras having the ability to heal makes less sense than if they spewed fire or something. In DQ2, Mr. Bombastic calls in his posse because rats run together, the dancing fire breathes fire, and the gremlin with the googly eyes puts you to sleep. Abilities match design significantly closer now. Speaking of attacks, I skipped talking about magic last time for Dragon Quest 1, and that's because it just seemed more discussable now. Dragon Quest likes to have a little fun with magic. Even when it does the typical elemental spells you see in games, it has a little spin on the names in both English and Japanese. Fire spells get names like Sizz, and it calls the confusion spell Dazzle. It provides a fun personality not seen in other games, at least in the modern translations. You may notice in my DQ 1 and 2 footage that I say something different from what appears on screen. Before Dragon Quest VIII, the English versions name spells by their function, which some people like, but technically that doesn't match the Japanese spell names. In Japanese, their names do such weird shit that Japanese fans still guess the meaning on a few. Made harder because many use katakana, the writing system mostly used for foreign words, to make not foreign words. I guess foreign from existence. Yuji Horii names them by vibes from what I can tell. During battle in DQ1, you had 2 levels of healing, 2 levels of Sizz, your only attack magic, Snooze, and Fizzle to stop enemies from casting spells. Obtaining Snooze and Fizzle made you significantly more versatile at the times you received them, but as it goes on, it became a game of press one of the 2 that works on this guy before you smash attack, offering just enough depth to engage a player for the short runtime. Dragon Quest II more than doubles the spell count and splits them between Flaffy and Ewan, introducing buff and debuff spells to the series, appropriately titled Kabuff and Sap, as well as spells that differentiate between if they hit one enemy, all enemies, or all enemies within a group. Yeah, unlike most Final Fantasies where having an attack spell target multiple enemies lowers the damage number, Dragon Quest assigns a specific range for each spell, forcing you to rethink who to attack first by enemy type. You may have a time when you encounter one really tough enemy next to 4 smaller guys of the same type. Even though the strong guy can deal big numbers, you could possibly get all the small fry within 1 turn using the right spells. Most Dragon Quests, after this one, follow a growth formula where a character gains a single hit spell, followed by a multi-hit, then a stronger single, stronger multi, and so on. Additionally, while the series adds more elemental affinities, elemental attacks don't always have an equivalent in each element. As in, Crackle, the strongest ice spell, deals significantly less than Kazap, the strongest electric spell. However, DQ2 doesn't introduce those yet, I simply want to bring it up now to reiterate less in the future. DQ2 just has 4 regular offensive spells, plus 2 gimmick offensive spells, where we can see the magic system's minor fumble. Since they want to make Yuan the undisputed queen of spell casting, the spread came out a little funky. RPGs try to dish out spells to to characters and classes based on what fits thematically. At this point in RPGs, most characters always had a clear class. Well, Flaffy kinda should be like a red mage predecessor, and because he's weaker than the other two in both of the things he can do, he ends up with many parts of the game where I couldn't figure out what to do with him. He never one-shots enemies with his sword, and until level 18, pretty late into the game, he only has Sizz, a multi-hit spell starting in Dragon Quest III that only hits one in DQ2. It makes him the weakest Link. In the NES version, people rag on him for dying all the time, though I don't think he deserves too much hate in any remakes. In the late game, he does a good job at making sure your characters don't die while Yuen presses her big boom button. Additionally, Dragon Quest II adds more weapons that have secondary properties. One sword hits twice, and most staves cast a spell when used as an item. Due to the limited party options in Dragon Quest II, I didn't find most of them useful except for the power shield. It has a smaller defense than Erdrick's shield, but it does allow the user to cast mid-heal, freeing you to put Erdrick's shield on Flaffy and the power shield on Roma too, so he can heal himself if the situation demands it. Every character can get some good equipment, though I recognize on NES Flaffy could not equip many things, even Erdrick's armor, which did not make sense. He deserves it as much as Roma too. Now, anytime only one character died, it was always Flaffy. I remember in my run 2 years ago, he basically lived in that coffin. I guess thankfully I got lost a lot more in this playthrough, so my whole party had a higher level per area, which I guess leads to Dragon Quest II's exploration. I said DQ2 grows the most of the titles I've played so far, and if we go with that analogy, it suffers serious growing pains when it comes to the exploration. After Yuen joins us, we have one more leg of linear adventuring with 2 dungeons to get used to our new party, ending with a big jump off of Dragon's Horn Tower, I believe one of the more iconic moments based on how many times Enix recreates it. Moving to Lionsport, we meet a very important lady. This one, running from monsters. Once saved, her grandpa gifts us the very first boat in the series, thus opening up the entire map. For the Dragon Quests I've played so far, they make a radical narrative change once you get a boat. You no longer follow your linear path, and in Dragon Quest II, not even a good hint on where to go next, leaving normal players to probably head east to find something a little familiar. Alefgard from DQ1. Old Alefgard has changed significantly, as in, everything disappeared, only 4 places. Tantagel Castle, which as this townsperson states, fused with the city, the cave we found Princess Gwaelin in, with no items in it this time, so totally skippable, the shrine where you previously showed the mark of Erdrick, which doing as such again now will get you Erdrick's helmet, and the Dragon Lord's Castle? Dragon Quest I players might have this thought of, oh fuck, what if he came back? In my case, I initially thought maybe the new villain stationed himself or a general of his in the castle. While the top has become ruined, the basement has stayed mostly intact. Even still has Erdrick's sword somehow. Maybe the HD2D version mentions why. It looks more familiar as we reach the final floor with damaged tiles, water, and the Dragon Lord. We gotta stop him.
And there comes a giant fish!
As it turns out, the great-grandson of the Dragon Lord took over the castle. Dragon Lord's great-grandson, who has no other name, I even slightly spoiled myself on HD2D to check, does not have the same evil ambitions of the Dragon Lord. He does, however, not like Hargon taking over, so he decides to become chummy friends with us, telling us how we can stop him. We need to find 5 sigils to receive the protection of an elemental spirit, beginning the major goal of DQ2, the big dumb color-coded MacGuffin hunt that every RPG needing an easy structure or bloated runtime follows. You have played a game with this structure. I kinda wonder if hunting for the Dragon Balls had any influence on it. DQ1 came out around the General Blue story and DQ2 released right at the end of the Baba arc, so hunting for magic items absolutely could have passed Hori and Toriyama's minds. Anyways, remember how DQ1 you could figure out where to go by talking to everyone? DQ2, likely due to the rush state, does not give an equal amount of guidance for each sigil, and I think that hinders the overall experience more than anything else. Dragon Lord's great-grandson does tell us where to go first. A tower to the south for your typical dungeon with a sizable difficulty curve, myself dying a few times because of the dead ends in here. Pretty much every dungeon in DQ2 follows the war of attrition we had in Dragon Lord's castle, even ones I don't talk long about. Once we get the sigil here from this underwhelmingly easy group of gremlins, we have no real direction for where to go next. Thankfully, we did receive a map at the Dragon Lord's castle. Looking at it helps us figure out that we've explored most of the northern half of the map, leaving us with a few options on where to go next. No one in Alfgard gives hints on what each area has, and none sit right next to each other like Leonport did with Tantagel, meaning the player has a full choice on where to go next. For a little bit at least. Truthfully, the game expects you to visit all 5 of the available cities to see what you can and can't do in each, so you can figure out what to bring back to each city. Normally, where you go first you can do the least, and where you go last you can do the most. Not what I did in this run, but I recommend going to Zahan first and Baron last. Zahan has the Yggdrasil leaf on an island not far, which lets you revive characters. You can hold one at a time and return infinitely. Very useful since you unlock Kazing, the revive spell, very late for both characters. Inside Zahan, you find the golden key and another key item used to craft Ewan's best armor. Except the latter is locked behind jail locks you need the jailer key for, and super hurt panels you need Flappy's safe passage spell for. Yeah, so the keys. Dragon Quest II radically changes those in a way that stays throughout the series. Dragon Quest I, you buy keys from one of 2 dudes and could only hold 6. It made the acquisition of keys a huge milestone. However, constantly buying more for the same door sucked. Dragon Quest II has 3 different keys you find, which you can use infinitely. One early on in a side cave after we get Flaffy, and the other 2 in the new towns we can go to now. Similar to DQ1, these keys give us good reason to travel back to old cities to find hidden key items and equipment. If you follow on track to every new and old town with your keys, and listen to NPC hints, you should have everything needed to face the final boss. Lol, JK, not what happens. By God, when you reach around here, open a fucking guide. Besides on the Switch and mobile ports, you can only zoom back to the last town you slept at, making backtracking after you gain the keys so much more time consuming than in later games. Even worse on the Game Boy Color port with the screen crunch. I opened and closed that map frequently, which does require selecting it in your item menu. No one button opening on Game Boy Color. Following the check every city strat, you get 1 extra sigil back in Munahan, another from the Chad King of Durkendor, and a strange statue from a 3-town, 2-dungeon long quest line. But so much unanswered shit still. The King of Alfgard, he has a whole deal where he hides behind a gold door. Get up there with the gold key expecting a new reward. Nothing fucking happens. He lies and says he's not the king. Just optional flavor text. Another lady in Alfgard talks about the celestial skin, a magic fabric we can only find in the northern Dragonhorn Tower. Only she just specifies the floor. To my knowledge, your sole way to figure it out is by analyzing every square on the 3rd floor. So do that, bring the skin and the other key item from Zahan to this old tailor man in another town not worth talking about to get. I promise that he'll make Ewan's best dress. Alright, probably go sleep in an inn to make it ready. Nope! Fight some enemies? No chance! I did not figure it out during my run. He magically had it ready for me eventually. It seems you need to go to the inn, save the game, reset, load your save file, and only then does he finish the dress. What a whack-ass order of operations. Not to mention, after all that, we still need 2 more sigils. Got a statue, most of Erdrick's armor, all the keys, quite a few good magic spells, yet still 2 missing sigils. Sigils they could have easily put in these 2 towns that have not much going on, or maybe make dungeons next to them. We know we need all 5 to do something in this underwater shrine. The Dragon Lord's great-grandson said so, and RPG conventions normally dictate you should have all of them before going to the final dungeon. Something we can make our way towards if we wish, so fuck it off to that dungeon. By waving our new funny statue in front of this mountain, we find a cave that connects to Randarak, the land Hargon commands. From what I can tell, this cave has become one of the most infamous dungeons in all of Dragon Quest. Not only does it last a long time, featuring 7 floors with multiple entry points, it has traps preventing you from continuing if you walk wrong, and other false floors that drop you back down. Said false floors, get fucking this, lead to exclusive rooms where you find the soul sigil in this treasure chest behind poison panels, and Roma's best weapon, the Thunderbolt Blade, in the most asinine location you can think of. Keep those maps or a loud backseater with you. I didn't even count my party wipes. I think it took me 5 tries, maybe 6. At least one more than the lava dungeon that I never talked about. A dungeon where you basically lose when Flaffy dies since his safe passage avoids the lava damage. Ewan unlocks that turbo late. You will never use that here. Thankfully, you get some respite afterwards. While the snowy mountain contains the hardest random encounters so far, if you can weather just a few extra steps to this shrine, you find a man who saves your game and heals you simultaneously, plus a warp point back to the main area under him. Reminding me, I still don't have the final sigil and I skipped talking about the portals. Of the games I have played so far, 1 through 5, the portals are possibly the most useless aspect in the series. Besides when used to warp you to a totally different area during the linear part of each game, they serve next to no purpose. With zoom sucking in DQ2, you'd think they would cut down on backtracking, but the warp animation takes so long and you have no clue where it goes until you use it, causing you to waste more time trying to make use of them than just boating to where you want to go. Meaning I ignored them besides one point when I checked every single warp just in case it led to an exclusive area. It does not to my recollection in Dragon Quest II. However, one of these warp points has the final sigil right here in a random ass bush. Does anyone even hint about this? Well, yeah. One guard at a point when you get distracted by a side quest where Flaffy gets sick. He tells you to check the fire shrine. Since Dragon Quest II never actually names these shrine locations for you in-game, I assume he meant the sigil was somewhere back in the lava dungeon and swept it even more thoroughly. Look, I get that the standard RPG mid-game formula of find a town with story, followed by dungeon, followed by boss who gives you a reward, had not solidified yet. Dragon Quest II only uses standard enemies as bosses until the final dungeon, but a random bush. Jesus Christ! Anyways, we take the 5 sigils to an underwater shrine to receive the Eye of Rubus, a necklace awarded to the luminaries by the goddess everyone in the first 3 games worships. Rubus notices the 3 carry the blood of Erdrick, someone she made a promise to assist the bloodline of a long time ago. She tells us to use the necklace when confounded by evil illusions, setting us up for the final dungeon. Hot take alert here. Dragon Quest II starts the trend in DQ where the final dungeons are, a little flaccid, maybe more of a half-chub. I don't know how to put it, but besides DQ1, none of the final dungeons, note I say dungeons, not final boss, has gone the hardest in their given game yet for me. Despite the difficulty, the cave we just did evoked the most emotion out of me. You just can't beat through a leaf after finishing that one. Hargon's castle scares you with something wacky. You walk in to find yourself back at Middenhall. Not exactly what I expected. Everyone seems pretty chill about Hargon's reign, still selling items, letting you rest, and Hargon put bunny girls up at the throne room. In my opinion, not a bad deal.
You fucking idiot! Use the charm I just gave you!
Well, fuck. The bunny girls were illusions. Anyways, check the right walls and use the statue on the cross to make your way up for the main dungeon, which just has a standard tower climb. Hard enemies like the Wackolites and dragons from DQ1 appear, but no dead ends you can accidentally head down. Straightforward design. Your main trial comes from the 3 mid-bosses, Atlas, Pazuzu, and Belial. while not mentioned any time earlier, we can assume them to hold high rank in Hargon's army, as they look identical to enemies we fought outside with different colors. As a warning, do not waste your rare MP recovery items on them, because upon defeat, you don't need to refight them. Walking back up the tower after a death doesn't take too long. I died to 2 of them and it honestly didn't feel that bad. And you know what? Against Belial, the final general, Flaffy is finally getting his moment after his cousins fell. Okay, that would have been hype if he made it happen at least. For Hargon himself, I probably came a little overprepared. I recalled from my run 2 years ago that I died a shit ton of times against the final boss, motivating me to grind for a long time. Similar to the Dragon Lord from last time, I swept Hargon. Roma 2 basically did all the damage himself, while Flaffy and Ewan kept our defense and health up. With that, Hargon dies, ending his cult. He doesn't have a big transformation like the Dragon Lord, letting us go do the big talking to everyone segment. That's right, I guess cults do have someone they worship. Malroth, the evil praised by Hargon, has come to reign on your parade. Without proper preparation, Malroth can wreck you. I've heard even worse on NES. Flaffy and Ewan need to prioritize kabuffing the team and kasapping the enemy, respectively, while the hero deals as much damage as possible. If every stat looks right, let the princess cast her boom spell, but realistically, she and Flaffy gotta trade off healing. Do not assume any part of the fight a breather, even after this much grinding. With Malroth defeated, we can go off on the same congratulations lap as last time. Stop by and see how everyone's doing. Since Dragon Quest II had more named characters, I did feel more inclined to check on everyone. Ewan's dad can finally rest in peace. The King of Tantagel feels confident going back to his role. This amnesiac schmuck from earlier reunited with his gal pal, and the Dragon Lord's great-grandson declares himself our bestie. If not for the lack of a good zoom feature, I would have gone to check on even more characters. I love seeing the aftermath of the only 3 scions of Erdrick's deeds. Back at Middenhall Castle, our father offers us his crown as the new king of Middenhall. And unlike 1 where I think it did the ending perfectly with the hero leaving, Roma 2 has to take the crown. If you say no, the king tells you you have to infinitely. Same thing if you rejected Gwaelin in Dragon Quest I. Prince Flaffy returns to Cannock where he presumably takes the throne in the future. King Roma ascends now. The princess stays by Roma's side. Put down your pencil, they're cousins, because she can't return to her old home. While one kingdom has fallen, the scions of Erdrick live on to maintain peace and rebuild society in Alefgard. DQ2 is such a tough one. It expands on Dragon Quest I where it needed expansion, improving on every aspect of what makes a turn-based RPG good. It just needed some more time. Re-releases on Super Nintendo, Game Boy Color, and Switch have mitigated a few issues while adding some of their own, but some, like the vague direction to get the Sun Sigil, and massive difficulty spike near the end, can only change with alterations large enough to where you can't call it the same experience. Our luminaries had a legacy to uphold, the legacy of Erdrick, Roma 1, and Dragon Quest I the game. I feel like Dragon Quest II suffers the same fate that Dragon Quest I forced onto Ultima. Due to Dragon Quest I copying and improving upon Ultima in almost every way, I, and most people under 45, have no desire to touch Ultima on DOS. Dragon Quest I, while basic, escapes that fate with a certain retro charm that new RPGs can't match without people getting upset about losing their paychecks. Dragon Quest II offers the player an experience with an evolving story and a real battle system that nearly every other RPG with a party has followed so closely in the footsteps of, and it just seems like a beta for where the genre goes. The whole time I play, I just think about what later games do with this. Especially Dragon Quest III.